This afternoon's topic is all about applying. Our presenters will be Will Zhu, Tomiko Hell, and Jess Ventura, who will introduce themselves shortly. Just so that you guys are aware, a little bit of housekeeping information for you. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the eWeek website, hopefully within a couple of hours. Please feel free to ask questions at any point or time using the Q&A function. With no further ado, I will go ahead and turn it into our presenters.
Thank you, Carla. I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. My name is Will Lee Ladouceur. I'm part of the graduate division at UC Merced, and I work in recruitment and retention. And I'm going to hand it over to Tomiko.
Hi, my name is Tomiko Hale. I'm the director for the Graduate Program Services Office in the School of Engineering. I work with students from basically when they're interested in applying all the way to the end, making sure they earn the degree that they started out wanting to pursue.
And we also have Jessica Ventura here with us too. Jess, if you wanted to briefly introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Ventura and I'm with the Graduate Division, and I'll be helping to manage and moderate our Q&A today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. If you have questions as the presentation is going, feel free to drop it in the Q&A portion of Zoom, and we'll be able to address them once the presentation is wrapped up. All right. So as I mentioned, we are part of Graduate Division, both Jessica and myself. And Graduate Division oversees all aspects of graduate education, including the academic and research training of graduate students. The main ways you would be interacting with us as graduate students are through funding, our funding team, which handles your financial aid package, the admissions and time to degree portion, which going through the application process, you'll be dealing with one portion of our team. And as you're earning your degree, earning your master's or your PhD, you'll interact with them again for the time to degree portion. And in terms of resources for success, we have a Graduate Resource Center, which I'll be going over later in the presentation. We also are very proud of the fact that UC Merced is part of the top 100 in the US News and World Report in the best colleges rankings. We're also number 97 now among all national universities, number 40 among public universities. And we keep getting more and more accolades, and which is very important for a very young university such as ours. Just some fast facts for you, and we'll be dealing mainly with the graduate student portion. We're at 742 as of fall 2020 total number of graduate students, and the female to male population is roughly the same within the graduate student population as well. And a good portion of our graduate level students are from California itself, although we do have a very sizable international student population of about 40%. As I mentioned, we're continually growing, and we have over 38 countries represented here at UC Merced. And the portion on the left shows the population by program. Quantitative and systems biology has proven to be our biggest program so far. It's at 14.9%. That one is a little bit hidden, but the next one would be our EECS program at 10.7%. So just giving you a rough idea of the population distribution. And when you're considering graduate school and applying to different programs, we want you to think of these 6 different factors, really. The first of all being the type of research that is being given by the program or that is being conducted by the program that you're looking at. if you're looking at a PhD, especially since you're going to be focused on research, you want to make sure that the program and the faculty within that program is doing the type of research that you are interested in doing. You also want to make sure that there's more than one faculty member doing that type of research at that institution, because if for some reason you don't get along with a particular faculty member and they're the only one doing that research, you're kind of stuck with that mentor. Whereas if there's multiple faculty doing mentorship, then you have multiple opportunities to move around. You also want to look at your financial aid package that you're given. As a PhD student, you should be fully funded going into a graduate program. And if you're going into a master's program, there might be some funding that can be given to you, whereas some schools may not have those resources to give that to you as a master's student. You also want to consider the size of the program that you're going into. Do you like being a part of a big cohort and have multiple networking opportunities, or do you like a smaller program where maybe you get more one-on-one faculty mentorship? You also want to consider location, because going into a master's program, you're looking at 2 to 3 years of a program, and into a PhD program, you're looking at 4 to 5 years. So really consider where you're going to be living for that duration of time. And you also want to consider what resources and services are offered to you as a graduate student to make sure you are successful going into that program. So when you're considering the graduate school application, and this is pretty universal across all programs at all institutions, they'll be looking at kind of these 5 different areas. So your GPA, GRE, if they're still requiring it, which we'll talk about in a little bit, your statement essays, letters of recommendation, and research experience. And what we like to say is think of it as your application as a table with legs. Those legs are made out of these 5 different areas: GPA, GRE, statement essays, etc. And so if you're weaker in one area, you'll be taking away one of those legs. So if you're strong in 4 out of 5 areas, the table is still strong. If you're strong in maybe only 3 out of the 5 areas, the table is still steady. It's a little bit wobbly. But if you're only strong in 2 out of the 5 areas, then it's maybe not as stable of an application, and you might want to take some time to really strengthen some of those areas and address those holes.
So talking about parts of your application, the first thing you need to make sure that you're having is strong academic performance. Most graduate programs require at least a 3.0 or above GPA. You need to send all your transcripts for your undergraduate degree. So if you took some courses at community college before coming to a 4-year university, or if you've taken summer courses, you need to submit all your transcripts related to your undergraduate degree to the place that you're applying. Most students want to know, how are your transcripts evaluated? Well, first you have a cumulative GPA, and some programs will review kind of your major requirements or your last 60 to 90 units, so your last 2 or 2.5 years of your coursework, which most students, that is their major coursework. And then you need to address any gaps in your education, or if your GPA is not as strong as you would like, you need to address that in your personal statement. At UC Merced, we do review applications holistically. So if you do not have a 3.0 or above, that doesn't mean you're automatically denied. Like Will said, you need to think about your application as a table with legs. So this is just one component of your application.
Great, thank you, Tamiko. Speaking of GREs, the graduate record examinations, it consists of 3 sections: the quantitative, the verbal, and the analytical writing. Your score is valid for 5 years once you take the GRE. So you can take it ahead of time or a little bit after, and it'll still be good for a good amount of time. And it's important to realize that different programs can emphasize one section over the other. For example, if you're going into engineering or a science-based STEM program, it might focus more on the quantitative score rather than the verbal score. And if you're going into a social science program, it might be focused more on the verbal rather than the quantitative. And it is also important to see if a program requires subject exams, for example. Some programs, such as the physics program, might require the physics subject exam going into that program. So as you're researching these different programs, it's important to ask these questions. What portion of the GRE do you focus on? Do you require a subject exam? And the third thing is, do you even require the GRE? Because a lot of our programs at UC Merced are now no longer requiring the GRE, and that's pretty universal. A lot of institutions are starting to realize that since it is a standardized exam, it doesn't necessarily indicate how you will do as a graduate student. So do check as you're researching the programs to see if they require the GRE after all. It is also important to note that your GPA and the GRE can be used by some programs and some institutions to give you a larger amount of fellowship. So if you have a high GPA and high GRE score, for example, they kind of use those two scores as factors in awarding higher level fellowships. And we do want to encourage you to take advantage of campus resources, because some programs, like the Career Center at our institution, for example, might offer preparation programs for the GRE. And as I mentioned, how some programs are requiring and not requiring it, there are only 4 programs currently at UC Merced that are definitely requiring the GRE. And again, they'll be reevaluating it after this admission cycle. But for now, these are the 4 that are requiring it. EECS, our Electrical Engineering and Computer Sciences program, requires it for the master's program, and it's encouraging it for the PhD program. If you are looking for more information about the GRE, the website is ets.org/GRE. And I should also mention that we'll be sharing this presentation with you afterwards too. So these are all hyperlinked, so you'll be able just to click on it directly from the slide. The website offers practice exams. It has multiple test dates, and there are waivers for exam fees if you do qualify for it. So all that information is available on the GRE website. Statement essays are another portion. In reality, it's a very critical component of your application, because it's your chance to state your case why you would be an asset to this graduate program that you're applying to. In general, personal statements, essays are about 1 to 2 pages. We do not recommend going over 2 pages unless a program specifically asks for it. The reason being that these are faculty that are on the admissions committee, and they're the ones reading through all the applications, and they tend not to read past 2 pages on essays. So do be as concise as possible within those 2 pages to really sell yourself. And you do want to read the prompt or direction for the essay itself very carefully, because they can vary from program to program. And you should definitely adapt your essays based on what the program is looking for. And I'll go over that in my next slide as an example. As I mentioned, admissions committees consist of professors in that field. So do be very aware of who your audience is. You'll be speaking at a higher level in terms of research, your own capabilities, the types of courses that you've taken, because faculty would be very knowledgeable about that. And statement essays can also be used to see if you qualify for additional funding. For example, we had a student who was a ward of the state, and they didn't necessarily mention that in their application, but they did mention it in their statement essay, and that's how the faculty found out that the student was available for additional funding. So as I mentioned, statement essays should be adapted to the graduate program that you're applying to. And the reason why you should adapt it, this is an example of what different admissions committees were looking for in a student. And this is a sample of different institutions and programs at the same time. So for example, one program was looking for an intelligent student who can withstand the academic workload of a graduate program. So maybe that statement essay would be more focused on how well they did in upper division courses. Another focused more on professional experience in a related field. So maybe that statement essay focused more on your work experience and how well you did in that environment. And then finally, another example would be a potential remarkable representative of that grad school in your future career. So they were looking well ahead to when the student was an alumni of that program. And so maybe they were looking for an outstanding student who they felt would be able to really represent their program once they graduated and would come back and talk to future students.
So the next component of your application are the letters of recommendation. So you should really think in terms of quality and quantity. For most programs, 3 letters of recommendation are required. You should consider getting letters from faculty with whom you've done research with, faculty from whom you've taken upper division coursework, and internship supervisors or relevant work experience supervisors. A lot of students would like to get letters of recommendation from their academic advisors. Like Will stated before, your admissions committees are of faculty, right? The faculty are the admissions committee. And faculty like to read letters from people that write and talk like them, which are the faculty. And the faculty are the ones that are going to be able to attest of how well you as an applicant or a future student can perform in the class, the graduate level coursework, as well as any research projects. So that is why it is important to have a minimum of 2 letters from faculty. And the biggest question we usually get from students is, how much lead time should we give? You should give your faculty at least a month. And the reason being is that they're busy. And you may have to give them a couple of reminders to submit your letters of recommendation. And most graduate programs will not review your application until it's complete. So if you're trying to meet either a fellowship deadline or you want to make sure your application is reviewed, you need to have it as complete as possible. One big pet peeve of the faculty is to be asked like a week before it's due and you don't know what kind of letter you're going to get. You may get a very rushed letter and it may not be the letter that is going to put you in the best light possible because you're asking them to rush it. So research experience, that is another component, especially when you're looking at PhD programs. And why is it important? You get an inside look at what an academic or research career can offer. You learn about cutting edge discoveries being made in your field. You're able to acquire research and lab skills. You get to hone critical thinking and writing skills when you're doing research in a lab. You get to network, so you get to meet current graduate students, lab managers, postdocs, as well as getting to interact with other faculty members. You can establish relationships with faculty who can write those strong letters of recommendation that you're looking for when you're applying to graduate school. And then if you are eligible, or if you have not heard about it, you should most definitely take a look at this website, the UROC Center. So it's the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Center here on campus. They have lots of programs that are designed to help you get even more intense training. They pay for students to do research during the academic year or the summer, as well as this entire workshop that we're doing, you get more in-depth, kind of like boot camp training and resources to help prepare you put forth the best application possible. And research experience is very important. I've had students who did research as undergraduates, and sometimes that makes their decision if they want to even pursue a PhD or do a career in research. So whether or not you think it's important now, if you are able to get involved in research, whether it's an independent study class or volunteering in a lab, you should at least give it a try, and that will help you kind of make a decision which way to go if graduate school or pursuing a PhD is the right choice for you.
Right. So those are the 5 important components of your application. And as I've been recruiting a lot, both Jessica and myself, and Tomiko as well, have been hearing a lot of questions or myths that undergraduate students have about graduate school, and we want to kind of dispel some of those myths. The first one is, I can't afford graduate school. If you're going into a PhD program especially, those are fully funded. So they are practically paying you to go to graduate school. They pay your, being a part of a PhD program pays for your tuition and fees. And it gives you a stipend on top of that, like a living stipend, because you are either employed as a teaching assistant, a graduate student researcher, or you're getting a fellowship, which is similar to like a scholarship. And the other important thing, if you're going into a master's program, as I mentioned before, those aren't fully funded like PhD programs, but there are different funding opportunities that you can apply for. And in a future slide, we'll have a link to some external fellowships or scholarships that you can apply for as a master's student. The second myth that we hear is, if the program is not top ranked, it's not worth it. So this question usually comes up when people are first hearing about UC Merced, and maybe we were lower in the rankings when we first started, but especially if you're looking at a graduate program itself and a PhD program specifically, you're doing research with a faculty member. So what is important at the graduate level is the type of research that the faculty member is doing, because you're going to get involved as a graduate student with that research. And so if that faculty member is highly cited, if they have tons of awards and grants, that becomes more important than where a graduate program is ranked. The next one is, I'm too old for graduate school, or on the other side, I'm too young for graduate school. You're never too old or too young to go to graduate school. The actual average age of a graduate school student is 37. So it gives you an idea of what the average age is, and how if you're going in directly from a bachelor's, it's not too early or too late. And even if you are taking a break in between, again, it's not too early or too late. The next myth is, I need to have a master's degree before I get into a PhD program. That is not true. You can go into a PhD program directly after you've completed your bachelor's degree. Next one is, I'm only a second year, I don't need to really think about graduate school. While it's true that it might be a few years off for you, there's a lot of planning that can still go into thinking about graduate school or preparing for your graduate school application. And the message that we want to send to you as a takeaway is, start preparing now, no matter what year you're in. So things you can do now as a planning goal for graduate school: look at testing dates and prepare for them. So the GRE, for example, if the program you're applying to requires the GRE, start looking at when test dates are. Start preparing for that exam. Start looking at who your potential recommenders might be for letters of recommendation. As you're looking at different graduate programs, check for what requirements they have, any unusual ones, apart from the 5 that we mentioned. Look at who your school contacts and campus resources are for those programs. For example, there's usually a contact in admissions during the application process, and you want to make sure you have that person's information in case you have questions along the way. You also want to check and see what resources they offer you to make sure you're successful as a graduate student. You can start looking into research opportunities if you haven't done research as an undergrad. Either summer research opportunities or independent study, whatever you can do. You can also write your essays well ahead of time and have them reviewed by peers, by faculty, by staff, so they can give you feedback on your statement essays. And I've kind of broken this down by year. That you don't have to follow this strictly, but this just gives you an idea of the types of things you can prepare for broken down by year. So example, in year 2, You can start asking peers for recommendations of faculty with whom to take upper division courses with. That's actually something that I did as an undergrad. Is I started asking my peers that were higher up, year 3 or 4, hey, what are some good faculty that offer good classes or have research opportunities? And they gave me tons of suggestions. You can start looking into summer research opportunities in year 2. You can attend graduate fairs in the fall. UC Merced has a graduate fair in the fall where they'll invite other schools to come in and they'll talk about graduate programs. So that's a good place to learn about the different graduate programs different schools offer. And it also gives you a contact at that school too, in case you have questions. There's also the California Diversity Forum. It's offered in the fall or the spring. And again, it's a big collection of schools that come together and you learn more information about the different graduate programs that are offered. And it also gives you advice, again, on the graduate application process itself. So that's another good forum to look into. You can also start attending office hours of faculty with whom you want to build good rapport with, who you can then ask later to see if they have research opportunities. And then you can come back after that and ask for letters of recommendation. Let me see, anything unique in year 3? In year 3, you can create a list of schools that offers graduate programs that you're interested in, along with the requirements that they have for that particular program. In year 4 to 5, you can notify faculty that you want to have your letter of recommendation from them, just to give them a heads up. You can start writing and rewriting your statement essays. You can prepare for and take the GRE. And then that's also the year that you would apply to graduate programs. So lots of things you can do well in advance of graduating as an undergraduate. I also wanted to take the opportunity to tell you why UC Merced is unique for graduate programs itself. We do have smaller programs because we are a newer campus, but smaller programs equals more time with faculty working on research and mentorship, which as a PhD student is very critical because you want to have mentorship as a PhD student, whether it's in the form of job opportunities, research opportunities, or academic opportunities. That one-on-one time is critically important in any graduate program. And at a bigger program, you might not have that necessarily one-on-one time with your faculty mentor. We are a growing campus, and with that comes new facilities, new resources, and new research space offered to you. You're the first to get a crack at all this new equipment that faculty are using for research, and that could be very important when doing your dissertation because you have access to newer things. And since we are a smaller and newer campus, you get to make your mark as a graduate student. You make your own opportunities and you can make a difference because we don't have 50+ years of history yet. You do have a chance to really stand out amongst your peers. We also have a big focus on interdisciplinary research, which you've probably seen as an undergraduate here at UC Merced as well. But just know that you're not stuck with one particular program. If you're going into bioengineering, for example, as a graduate student, but also have interest in mechanical engineering, you can potentially work with faculty in both areas on your research. And UC Merced has many research strengths for a newer university. We have strong ties in climate change and ecology, solar and renewable energy, air and water quality, artificial intelligence, CogSci, stem cell, diabetes, cancer, and big data analysis.
So here are the programs that the School of Engineering offers here at UC Merced. We have a master's and PhD in bioengineering. It's an interdisciplinary program. We have a master's and PhD in electrical engineering and computer science, also known as EECS. We have a master's and PhD in environmental systems, also known as ES. We have a master's of management, which is our professional degree. It's a 1-year, 12-month cohort style program. And it's also known as MIST. We have a PhD in management of complex systems. MCS. We have a master's and PhD in materials and biomaterials science and engineering, which is also known as MBSC, and a master's and PhD in mechanical engineering.
And we're also very fond of our acronyms at UC
Oh,
Merced.
Yes.
And we want to invite you to learn more about these programs. We have digital brochures for all the programs that Tomiko mentioned at this website. You'll be able to go in and take a look at the types of research and the faculty within those areas as well, within those digital brochures.
So note that Will mentioned earlier about funding as one of the myths students have. Well, we want you to know at UC Merced, about 90% of our PhD students receive funding. And funding comes in a variety of forms. So fellowships, which mean students are awarded a stipend and tuition and fee payment. And essentially, you don't work for that money. We have quite a few competitive, and they're competitive. So we do have fellowships that students are eligible for as incoming students that you are nominated during the application process. And there are fellowships for continuing students as well. We have funding in the form of teaching assistantships. And many of you know there are the TAs that are running your lab or your discussion sections right now. We have funding in the form of graduate student researcher appointments. They're also called GSR. And that is where you are paid from a faculty's research funds to do research for that particular semester, year, or summer. There are grant opportunities where it's a competitive process, but students can apply for grant opportunities. Our graduate division provides a lot of information and resources to help students apply for those grant opportunities, as well as your faculty advisor may also be sending you information of grant opportunities to apply for. And then there are also opportunities for you to apply for pre-doctoral fellowships. And you can find all of this information on the website that is listed below about external funding resources.
And as you know, as UC Merced students, we're very affordable as a city. Merced is one of the most affordable cities to live in when comparing UC institutions. This is important as a graduate student because, as Tomiko just mentioned, you can be paid in a form of employment, such as a teaching assistantship or a graduate student researcher position. And those are universal. They get paid the same amount across the UC system. So the amount that you earn at Merced really stretches because our cost of housing is a lot lower. We don't have a housing crisis, thankfully, so you're not competing with other graduate students for a limited amount of housing spots. And all of this information is available at livingwage.mit.edu. As I mentioned before, you do want to make sure the campus has resources to make sure you are successful as a graduate student. At UC Merced, we have the Graduate Student Resource Center, which is dedicated to making sure you succeed. It offers peer mentors, diversity and inclusion workshops, student wellness programs, and social activities. There are also statistics and writing tutors available each semester for graduate students. And you also get where you're paired with a PhD student that's maybe in their second and above year. And they really serve as a good first point of contact for you as a graduate student with any questions you might have. And as you know, there are also student organizations available to all students, but there are also organizations that are grad student specific, which can be viewed at the website there.
So hopefully we've inspired you to apply, right? So here are some tips on applying to UC Merced. The earlier you apply, the better. A lot of programs have priority deadlines. I know in environmental systems, their priority consideration deadline is December 15th. And those are all listed on the graduate division website. But if you miss the priority deadline, the final deadline for most programs is January 15th. We do have mechanical engineering accepts applications on a rolling basis, but if you really want to be considered for fellowships or priority funding, you need to get your application in as soon as possible. And there are also application fee waivers that are available. They are available for domestic applications only. Some fee waivers are provided by the graduate enrichment program participants, such as LSAMP, MARC, or McNair Scholars Programs. But I know this past year, Dean Matsumoto in engineering has offered to pay all the application fees for domestic PhD students. So any domestic PhD applicant, the School of Engineering paid their application fee. So yes, there is opportunity to, and graduate school applications are very expensive. I think our application fee is like $125. So if you do that times, several programs, you're out of $1,000. So if you are eligible for fee waivers, by all means ask for them. And if you participate in some of the programs, or if you attend graduate fairs, sometimes if you go to some of the graduate fairs, they provide fee waiver applications just by you attending the graduate fairs. So make sure if you're interested in certain graduate schools, go to their fairs, stop at their booths, contact their staff members, and see if you can get a fee waiver for their applications.
Great. And that pretty much concludes the presentation portion. We do want to encourage you to contact us if you have any questions at all. Our contact information is listed there. We also have social media contacts as well, so feel free to follow us there too. But with that, I think we're going to move over to the Q&A portion.